So I have shared a little bit about my profound experience that I had about 3 years ago now, when I went on a totally silent meditation retreat. And I haven't given you the full, well-rounded understanding of this experience. So I thought today I would share with you my out-of-body experience and also some of the drawbacks to this, some of the things that I missed out on the first video that I've done on this, which was about a year or so ago, just to give you the full picture. I don't know why I didn't go into the details that I'm going to go into in this video before. I don't know whether it was just I was more excited about talking about the good side of it. I'm not sure, but in today's video I'm going to give you all of the details. So if you've clicked on this video, this is going to be quite, I think, inspirational, but also it will give you something to think about as in terms of pushing the limits of meditation. So as a caveat, I got into meditation when I was 6 years old. My dad was a teacher. I came under the guidance of him and then also a really profound teacher who taught my dad. So I had a lot of experience and I just wanted to isolate myself basically for 10 days away from my girlfriend, as much as I love her, away from work, away from distractions, and just go into a retreat where I can just be in complete silence, not have the distraction of my phone, of work, of any of the things I mentioned, and just immerse myself completely in spiritual work, basically. So because of the guidance and because of the history that I've got, I had in my mind not to actually adopt the principles and practices. Well, the principles I did, but not the techniques that they teach you on Vipassana course. And I wouldn't advise others to do that. This was just how I felt at the time and what I did at the time. And it wasn't because I felt like Vipassana didn't have anything to teach me or anything like that. I'm sure they do. It was more just that I had tools that I'd been using for years and that were working, but I wanted some space and time where I could just dive into them more deeply. So I went on to this course. It's a 10-day course. You give in your phone, you give everything in. You're not allowed books or anything like that. You have these simple dorms, vegetarian food, 2 meals a day and a snack in the evening. Beautiful, beautiful experience. So I was getting into things over the first couple of days. I was meditating fairly consistent. Well, I was meditating 10 hours a day. I was going to say fairly consistently. I was meditating 10 hours a day. We were up at 4 in the morning and we went to bed at about 9 p.m. So throughout the day, there was just lots of meditations, anywhere between an hour and 4 hours long. So all day long, basically, you're just meditating. You meditate, come out, eat, go for a walk, then you're back, meditate. And it just goes on like that. And I was loving it. I was loving the silence. I didn't miss anything. I didn't miss my phone. I didn't miss anyone that's close to me. I was just immersed in this world. And that continued as the days went on. And I did have my challenges because I've got an issue with my hip, a physical injury with my hip. And that was giving me some issues when I was sitting down cross-legged, and it's quite funny actually. I went to the doctors actually about a week before I ended up going on this course to get the results from an MRI scan, and they found a hip impingement, something called a hip impingement. And the doctor then gave me a list of all the activities to avoid, and one of the activities or the things on that list was to not sit cross-legged on the floor. And I said to the doctor, I said, well, I'm going on a silent meditation retreat that requires us to meditate for about 10 hours a day. So that's not actually going to happen. And it did provide a bit of resistance. That it was almost like the final thing that was going to stop me. You know, we always have there's always, when you're going into any endeavor, there's often challenges or things that will crop up almost to test like how much you really want to go on it or how much you really want to do that thing. And this was like the final, barrier that appeared, and I thought, no, I'm committed now, so close to it, I'll just work through it, whatever happens. In worst case scenario, I can always leave, but that would have to be really, really bad. So anyway, meditated really, really well for first couple of days. I was sort of working out and ironing out the different issues with my hip in terms of like using cushions to support it a bit more and that type of thing. By the time we got to day 7, I was feeling great. And I sat down on the final meditation, final meditation on day 7 to meditate. Sat down and I just began following my breath. And in this moment, I just started to feel, it was almost like someone had their finger on the tip of my nose. The sensation was so strong, right on the end of my nose, and it felt really, really obvious. So it gave me a really tangible focal point. I mean, by this point, day 7, if anyone's ever been on this type of course or meditates a lot, you'll know that you become hypersensitive to the sensations of breathing anyway when you're doing that type of meditation. But this was much more obvious and prominent. So I started to just observe that sensation and just started to notice it. And within maybe 5 to 10 seconds, I was on a kneeling stool actually at this point. Within 5 to 10 seconds, I started to notice that my feet were going numb. And I thought, that's weird. I've literally been sat down for like 10, 20 seconds at this point. And my feet felt as though they were completely numb, like I'd had a general anaesthetic. And I wiggled my toes and I thought, oh no, I can feel them perfectly. And as soon as I brought my awareness back to my nose, which was so easy because it was such an obvious thing that was going on the tip of my nose for no reason, it was almost like someone was itching it. As soon as I did that, the awareness completely vanished again from my feet. And the longer I spent observing my breath, gently, this sensation of numbness, of total loss of body awareness, rose up from my feet, up my legs, and it felt as though if you've ever had a tooth out, or if you've ever had a operation where they give you a local anaesthetic, the area just goes completely numb, almost as if it's not attached to you anymore. I've never had it actually on the body, but I've had the same thing when I've had a tooth out when I was younger. Your mouth is just totally numb. You can't feel anything. It feels like it's not even there. Well, it was the exact same sensation I had that was rising up my legs. And this sensation rose all the way up over the course of maybe a minute or so. I mean, it's really hard to sort of work out how long all of this took, but it was very quick. It rose all the way up until my entire body was not there anymore in my awareness of it. But if I tuned into the body at any minute, I would feel it straight away. So I've experienced loss of body awareness to a different degree many, many times, where you just suddenly think, oh yeah, I didn't really notice the body now, and then you're back with it. This was completely different. This was like I was invisible. It was like I was totally gone. And I had my hands in a mudra, a hand position. This allows the free flow of energy. And as this sensation was rising up the body, I started to feel my fingers tremble. And as that happened, my eyelids also started to flicker. And it was almost like this energy was just building up and building up and building up. And then all of a sudden it was like a blockage or a gate opened, or a blockage just became unblocked. And it was like, poof. And this enormous, and I mean absolutely enormous surge of energy poured around my entire body. It was pouring around my arms because I had my hands connected. I could feel it coursing around, and I could feel the direction of flow. It was coursing down my legs, and it was a mixture of electricity, like a bioelectric kind of feeling, energy. It almost felt like it was coming through a pipeline about that big, just absolutely pouring around me. And as that energy had released, and as this sensation was rising, by the time the energy had completely unleashed, my awareness had completely gone from the body. And at that point, my consciousness suddenly opened up and expanded. With my eyes closed, obviously meditating at this point, and my consciousness just expands. And as it expands, I'm then traveling through these different planes of consciousness, these different planes of existence. So I can feel as I'm moving through them, it feels like I'm a shooting star. I'm flying almost, and I'm still able to observe the breath at this time. I'm observing the breath the whole time, but at the same time, traveling. It's hard to describe. And as I would go through these different planes, I would become lighter. I'd become more purified. It's almost like I was losing a sheath. Every time I got higher, I was moving into a different body. So obviously down here we've got the physical body, and then one up from that is the etheric body, then there's the astral body, and so on. And these are different densities, if you like. They're different vibrations of energy. So each layer has a more a lighter sheath, you could say, a more purified sheath. So I was taking off, it felt as though I was taking off these sheaths each time I went through another layer. And it came to a point where everything opened up and it was almost as if I was in space. Now, one thing I do want to make clear is that I hear many people talk about experiences that they have, and they often can't determine whether it was like a dream state or whether it actually happened or whether they imagined it. This was more realistic than anything I've ever experienced in my entire life. It's more realistic than this physical plane. The physical aspect of this plane feels incredibly real, but when I came down from this, it felt like I downgraded. It felt completely different, but it wasn't physical, but it was more real. It was almost like I was moving into what I really am. You know, I was getting closer to what I really am, which is not this. So it felt incredibly real, incredibly real. And as I was going up, I started to become aware, or I don't know if it's aware, but I started to wonder whether I could come back into my body. And as I thought about my body, I would immediately be back in it. And then as I tuned into my breath again, I would rise up. And I did this over and over again. And what I found was that the first few times that I did it, I would come down into my body so strongly that I would actually jolt. Now, this was a bit of a problem because I was on a kneeling stool, sitting and meditating in a room full of about 100 people in total silence, no background music or anything. So me making a bit of a jolt like that felt like a really big distraction. So I was having to practice coming into my body smoothly without there being any sort of movement from me, basically. So I did that a few times. I rose up, I decided I wanted to be in the body again, and I'd come back down, but I'd come back down a bit smoother, and then I'd rise up again. And I did this quite a few times. And in the end, I had to do it more often than I would have liked, because what I started to find was my mouth would salivate. Now, this is quite a common experience that many meditators will have. You'll start meditating and you'll notice that you're having to swallow more than usual. Now, this is actually a distraction that the ego creates in order to redirect your attention and stop you going further in your practice. Because as you're starting to transcend the senses will work very hard to try to stop you. In a subtle ways, this is one of them. I knew all of this before, so as soon as my mouth started to salivate, I mean, I wasn't giving it any attention because I was so easily able to transcend the body that it was no problem for me to just observe the breath in this particular moment. But the problem that I was having was that my mouth was filling up with saliva so quick that I was worried I was going to choke on it. So what I ended up having to do was sit forward and lean forward like this so that the saliva could stream out of my mouth. I know it doesn't sound very pretty, but it was the only way I could think of actually getting over it without stopping what I was doing. And I had like a blanket around me, so I just let it stream out onto the blanket. But I kept having to come back into the body because I was worried that I was going to choke on this saliva. I was filling up that quickly. It was like a tap. I'd go up, maybe it was time, maybe I was losing track of time as well, but I would go up for what felt like no time whatsoever, come back down and my mouth would be full to the brim with saliva and I'd have to let it stream out. So that was an issue. It was stopping me going further. And actually now in hindsight, it may not have even been a ego distraction. It may have been a divine intervention, because I think I was pushing the threshold of what I could cope with energetically. And I'll talk about that towards the end. So this happened, and as my consciousness opened up, it felt like I was in space, but more real than this, as I keep mentioning. And at that point, I could see this enormous energy, this enormous, huge light that was above me. And I was so in awe of it. I can't explain it, but I can't explain it more than I was so absolutely in awe and blown away by just the sheer magnitude of it, and not even the beauty of it, but the power of it, the immensity of it. And I felt like even though by this point I was in some form of light body, I felt like I had to bow down to it in a really beautiful way, like I wanted to. And anyway, long story short, I came back into the body, and before I knew it, the meditation had ended. And then from there, that meditation, there was a small break before the final meditation of the day. So we went on this small break, and I walked from the meditation block to our accommodation to go use the bathroom. And as I was walking, I've got electricity pouring off my hands. My body is going invisible. So it feels like my arms aren't there. It feels like my legs aren't there, but I'm still walking. Go to the toilet, come back. I think there was a talk or something in between, and then we meditated again. And I wondered whether I'd be able to reach that same state again. As soon as I went into meditation, poof, I was there again. I was able to keep doing this same thing. So that was really exciting, really fun. Oh, I've broken a barrier here. I've gone beyond an incredible experience. I know I'm not this body anymore. I know it for certain. No one on earth can tell me I'm this body because I've been beyond. I've been to the other planes. I've been to some of them at least. This was the kind of thought process that I was having at the time. So we go to bed that night. That meditation ends. It ends very quickly. It feels quick to me because I'm so deep. I go to the accommodation block, go to sleep. I can't sleep like a normal human. I go into a state of meditation at this time. This not normally, but just not on this occasion. I was in a state of meditation. I was in a void for hours and hours and hours. Didn't feel like hours to me, but hours passed and I was in a void, meaning that I was aware, but in a form of meditation throughout the entire process. So I wake up the next morning and I'm actually shattered. I'm knackered. And it's probably a byproduct of all the energy that I've had coursing through me, the amount of energy it takes to have an experience like this, perhaps some sleep deprivation that had built up over the days prior because I didn't feel like I was getting enough sleep. I was following the program, but I think my body needed more sleep generally. And a mixture of that night being in a state of meditation rather than a sleep state. I didn't feel as rejuvenated. So when I woke up, I was quite tired. And I think this influenced heavily what I'm about to explain to you. So from this point on, I mean, that night I was getting quite worried. Fear was beginning to manifest because I didn't know whether what I had triggered and what I had done was right. It was really down to the unknown. It was down to lack of understanding, lack of knowing whether this was right or not, or if I'd done something wrong. So these types of thoughts were starting to appear. Like, is this normal? I've woke up. It's hours and hours after the experience happened. I've still got energy. I've still got electricity pouring off my hands. I still feel waves of loss of awareness all over the body. I can feel energy pouring around me all the time. I'm in still a different state of consciousness, but I'm also very tired. And I think a mixture of all of this was bringing up a lot of fear, a lot of questioning. Now, by day 7, by this point actually day 8, your mind is so calm. So this was not me being bombarded by thoughts because the mind wasn't calm and centered. I was incredibly centered by this point, and I went onto the course feeling stronger than ever. I'd never ever suffered with anxiety, depression, things like that. Not to any great extent, just the normal simmerings that we all probably have at some point or another. And so I felt great, and I couldn't understand why I was experiencing what I was experiencing, and I didn't know whether it was correct or not, and that was what was creating more fear. So that morning, I wondered again. I thought, I wonder if this experience is going to happen again, or whether that was just a one-off. I had an experience, and now it's gone again, and my meditations are back to where they were. So I sat down to meditate, put my hands together in a different mudra, tuned into the breath, straight into this transcended state. Not with the initial energy rush that was there on the first instance, wasn't there, but the ability for me to transcend was immediately there, and I still had the energy that was left over from that initial surge coursing around me, of which there was a lot of it, by the way. So I could immediately transcend, and this was where it got freaky, was that I went to meditate, I closed my eyes, I opened my eyes after what felt quite literally like 5 minutes, and I looked up at the clock and a full 50 minutes had gone, and I could not believe it. And I mean, we talk about it often in meditation about, time going much quicker or much slower depending on what happens. Quite often you'll sit down to meditate and lots of, a chunk of time will go missing, but this was so ridiculously extreme. I remember having to check it again, and we could walk out into the corridor and there was another clock, and I walked out there and checked and it was right. And I thought, how has that been that amount of time? It felt 5 minutes maximum to me. So it was just a display, I suppose, of the state I was reaching in that particular meditation. So that happened, and at some point then, I think that was like a couple of hours of meditation to begin with, and then eventually go and have breakfast. And by the time we got to the point of having breakfast, I was quite concerned because I still had energy pouring around me, electricity coming off my hands, waves of body awareness disappearing, so my arms would feel like they're just not there. I'd feel waves of it. My legs would feel like they weren't there. I felt completely invisible at points. And as we'd have breakfast and then you could go for a walk and get, it's not exercise, but just walk around the gardens there. And as I was walking around the gardens, I had a flash of a demon come into my mind. This was where the mind started to play more games. I think probably not even playing games, but just even discerning what was right or wrong was difficult. So I had this flash of a demon come into my mind, and if you Google what a demon looks like, those images that come up are exactly like the image that I saw, clear as day in my consciousness around here. And as soon as I connected with the divine and asked for help, within maybe 5 seconds it did disappear, fortunately. But all of this is going on, and I'm starting to think, like, what is happening? Like, how can I get this energy out of me? And why is it that every single time I sit down to meditate now, I'm immediately leaving my body? And I can't really control it. As soon as I tune into the breath, within 5 or 10 seconds, I'm gone, totally gone. And that sounds like an amazing thing to happen. And now, there's been many times since that I'm like, I wish I could do that to the same extent, because I've had moments like this since that experience, but I can't just on demand do this, not anymore. So that was going on, and I was starting to feel more fear around this, because I'd been seeing that I'd saw that demon. I still had energy pouring around me that I couldn't get rid of, and alongside all of this, there's no one that you can talk to. You can talk to the teachers, you can pull them aside and speak to them, but I didn't feel as though they would understand. And all I wanted to do was speak to my teacher back home, because I knew he would understand because of the level he's at. But you can't phone anyone, you can't talk to anyone. So you've got to contain all of this within you and just try to find some mental balance. And it became very difficult, because every time I went to meditate, I couldn't stop myself leaving my body. I would feel the energy build up more. And for 10 hours a day, I had to try to manage how to work with this, because it felt as though by this point, my mind was so full of energy, I can't even explain. The closest way I could describe it was if you had a 100-watt light bulb and you put 100 watts into it, it couldn't take a speck more. That was how my mind was. It was like if anyone put any more energy into my mind, that would be the thing that pushed it over the edge, straight into psychosis or just lost. It was so full, and I can't describe it in any other way. And when I reflected on this experience after the experience of that fullness, I remember thinking, like, when I was younger, I used to do a lot of sort of pushing myself to my mental limits. I did Ironman triathlon. I climbed mountains all around the world. I did 50-mile ultra marathons, swim marathons. I was really mentally strong, and I've been meditating for a long time. So I felt like I had like good discipline, good ability to push through challenges, not be unbalanced by things. not had depression, anxiety, stuff like that. So mentally, I felt so strong. But this was completely different. It wasn't down to mental strength. It was almost like the capacity of my mind had been taken to the threshold of what it could contain. That's how it felt. And when people have come to me since and said, I'd love to have an experience, or I want to do this, or I want to do that. I want, my meditations to be profound. I tell them, be careful what you wish for, because I was in that good of a mental state before, and the experience I had nearly took me to what it did. It took me to the very, very edge of what I could cope with. So it went from a beautiful experience, a transcended experience, profound, enlightening, huge expansion, learned loads, knew a lot more, had certainty of more of the truth of my own nature, all of that. But at the same time, the byproduct was very, very scary, very hard to deal with. It took every single ounce of my willpower to keep me in a state, to keep my mind mentally stable through the days that followed that experience, because of the energy that I was containing, and because of the lack of the sort of uncertainty that was there, and the inability to talk to people and that type of thing, the inability to get the energy out of me. For days and days after, I had all of this energy, this electricity, what felt like electricity coming off my hands, everything. Couldn't sleep because I kept going into this void-like state in meditation, in sleep. Sorry, I'd go into this meditation state, and at one point, I actually decided that I think it's better. I basically decided that I need to speak to my teacher, because he will know what's happened. And I believe that I've contacted him in this deep state of meditation, which I'll talk to you about at the end. And so I wanted to speak to him to find out what on earth has happened and what's going on. So I actually walked to the teacher's, or like the manager's, accommodation, and I knocked on the door, and I was going to leave the course. This was day 9, I think. Day 8 or 9. I lose track now. But I knocked on the door and no one answered. And so I took that as a sign that I should stay on the course. But I was very ready to leave the course. And I ended up going back, and I had to grit my teeth and grind through the next day or two, however long it was. It felt like a long time. Meditating 10 hours a day, trying to stop this energy rising, trying to stop myself from leaving my body all the time, trying to figure out how to get back to sleep at night, trying to let go of this energy, which I couldn't get it out of me. I just had to wait for it to dissipate over 3-4 days. So all of that happened, and my mind had been taken right to the very edge of what it could cope with. I quite literally felt like on day 8, probably, very on the edge of tipping into psychosis. Very, very on the edge. But I didn't, fortunately. I think now when I reflect, I think I was praying all the way through to only be given the experience that is correct for me and that I can deal with, and no more than that. And that was the only comfort that I had throughout that experience, knowing that I asked for that, and kind of knowing that with the faith that I've got, that's what I asked for, and this must be what I've been given, exactly what I can cope with and no more. So I don't want to scaremonger people, because we should all keep pushing and keep meditating and working at trying to understand ourselves more and get closer to the divine. But I did want to share with you that aspect, the second half of my experience, and how scary it was, how serious it was, how much it took me to the very edge. So if you're thinking about going on a 10-day silent meditation retreat, or you want to go on one of these, like any kind of intensive meditation experiences, I would be very, very careful about doing that, because not a lot is understood about that type of thing. Experiences aren't really understood by many teachers, and you're actually putting yourself at quite a bit of risk that you're going to push it too far. And to support that statement, just a couple of weeks ago, we had a friend staying over, and she said to me, I think it was on on the Thursday, she said a friend is finishing her Vipassana course on the Friday, and she's going to come, and I'm going to go meet her, and we're going to stay at my mum's house down in Cornwall. So, but a day earlier than she was supposed to finish, her friend called her, or 2 days or whatever it was, a friend called her and said, I've had to leave the course. I'm in a really bad state. My mind is I'm in a really bad mental state. I feel like I've got a Pac-Man eating my body, all these types of crazy things. And she had to leave the course, and she came and stayed with us. And fortunately, I think because I had been on that kind of course, I could talk to her about my experiences and comfort her somewhat, give her the comfort of knowing that things like this do happen and you generally will work through it. Don't worry too much. Just be steady, ground yourself, all of that type of thing. But she was, in my opinion, right on the border of where I kind of was, of losing it a bit. And I've had other students who have joined my school who have also told me experiences they've had that have not been good on longer courses, some going as far as actually ending up in hospital in psychosis. So meditation itself, if it's done responsibly, is totally safe. It's generally totally safe. If you're doing responsible types of techniques, if you've got a teacher there who can support you and assist you, and if you're not pushing things to the extremes, and what I mean by that is, like, most people might meditate for an hour a day, half an hour a day, maximum maybe 2 hours a day. But then to up that from 2 hours a day at the absolute most to 10 hours a day is a ridiculous jump. You'd never, go from running a 5K on a Saturday to running 100 miles on a Saturday, because you know that your body's not going to cope with that. Or if it does, it's going to probably damage you in some way. And meditation is quite similar. So I suppose what I'm sharing here is that even if you've got a lot of experience, be careful with pushing it too much. Just go gently. Just take small steps. I liken it sometimes to mountaineers that climb Everest. They don't just get off of the airport in Nepal, walk all the way up to base camp, and just literally walk straight up to the summit and come down. Fitness-wise, they could, but the altitude will get them because their bodies haven't got time to acclimatize to the thin air. So they have to go up very slowly. They have to go up to base camp, to camp 1, and then come down again and let the body adapt. Then they have to go to base to 1 and then to 2 and then come down again. And then a few days later, they'll go 1, 2, 3. And they go up slowly so everything can adapt to the new energy, or the air in this case. So this is what I wanted to share really about my experience and about generally pushing meditation and going on intense courses. And it's not to look down on any of these courses. I think they're done in a very pure way, but I think people are very naive when maybe they're not, but I think it's just risky, basically. I just think it's risky going on these courses. Many people have beautiful, amazing experiences and an amazing, profound time, and many people go totally the other way and end up in a very dark place. So be careful. I was going to add something else on the end about me seeing that experience. I won't bother with that because this video is already getting quite long. But yeah, I'm going to leave it at that. If anyone is interested in learning more about meditation or being part of a school community, I'll leave a link to my school in the description below. Failing that, I'll see you on the next video. Thanks a lot.